Alright, welcome back again. Just gonna jump right into continuing this nightmare. He hadn't felt any pain. He doesn't feel any pain right now either. Not physically, at least. It's something deeper. It's about who he used to be, who he is now, and who he's about to become. Something profoundly terrible has happened, and it's changed everything. He knows that much, at least. What he really wishes to know right now is who the hell he even is. He tries to think back to what he last remembers. Standing in front of everyone in the second grade, his trembling paws holding his book report. He clears his throat, trying to figure out how to put his sentences together in advance. Speak up, Arturo. The whole class needs to hear you. Arturo. That's his name. Arturo Herrera. He opens his eyes. But how did he end up here? Where are his classmates? Second grade? Or was it third? No, he's positive that he's at least in high school. He tries again to remember what happened last. He was sitting in the junior parking lot with his girlfriend. She was upset because another girl at school was being mean to her. She's a Jaguar sitting in the passenger seat of his beat up sedan, one of her feet up on the dash, and he's leaning toward her to kiss her on the cheek. What's her name? Sarah Mendoza. Was it Montoya? But now he remembered that they didn't last long at all, maybe only a semester. Probably because he sucks at comforting people. He does always say the wrong things at the wrong time. But he still had several girlfriends after her up until Ma- Ma- Maria? His voice is so alien, so strange, it startles him a bit. It's even more strange as to how hard it is to even say her name. He stutters and he has to chew around the syllables like he's biting at the letters. As he does, he notices a sour taste in his mouth and he can smell vomit. Looking at the forest floor in front of his face, and he sees a dried mess of what he's sure is the source of the smell. It's of something orange and mushy and chunks of what he recognizes as jerky. Things are starting to come together, but it takes a long time. Maybe even an hour as he goes in and out of consciousness. Maria, Pueblo, Devon, psychology, graduation, behavioral tech, road trip, accident, Echo, Cameron, THC cartridge, visions, ghosts, panic, bear, gunshot, gunshot. He's been shot. It's only now that he realizes his current position, curled up on his side, arms folded up in front of his chest. He tries to move his arms, but like everything else he's trying to do, it's very difficult. His muscles feel unnervingly weak, and every time he moves, it comes with an uncontrollable twitching and trembling. Arturo stares at his paws, watching the tremors, trying to quell the panic. Finally, he slowly manages to sit up. Immediately, dizziness overtakes him, and he has to pause for several seconds before he's sure he's not going to fall back down. Once he's sitting up, his stomach turns and he dry heaves, and that's when he feels the pain. It's not terrible, but deep, cold throb at the back of his head feels remarkably wrong. With a shaking paw, he reaches back and finally feels the damage. The fur is crusted and matted, becoming a bit damp as he gets closer to the source. His fingers brush over a slight gap, like there's a small crater in his fur. As he presses down, he realizes the crater goes past the fur, past the skin. He feels something oddly hard and almost sharp. Arturo gasps, realizing the stiff, jagged thing he's running a finger over is his broken skull. He jerks his paw away, breathing hard. He was shot in the head. In the head. He remembers deciding to run since the shotgun wasn't loaded, but then the bear had taken out another gun, a handgun, and how was he alive? How long will he stay alive? Is there a bullet in his brain right now? He knows he needs something, so he tries to ask for it. Need shelf melt. He struggles to not stutter, to say the right word that he knows he's trying to use. This is bad. Devin was hurt too, maybe even killed. Cameron, he was already hurt, and it was a monster in this forest that hurt him. The cat brings his knees up to his chest, putting his arms around them like he's a child. He feels like a child, helpless and completely confused as he sits injured in this terrible forest. This must be some kind of awful dream. He wants to wake up, but even though everything feels unfamiliar, surreal, dreamlike, he knows this is real. Arturo feels his face crumple as he starts to cry, pushing his forehead against his knees. I need something. No, wrong words. I need someone. There's some relief as Arturo feels like he's improving at least a little bit. Maybe this is only temporary. He'd been told several times in his psych and neuroscience courses that the brain is plastic. The fact that he's recalling these memories, making sense of these memories, gives him hope. There are still certain things, very simple things, that are missing. Ruined my life! Arturo jerks his head to look up, heaving again as another wave of dizziness and nausea sweeps through him. Cameron? He looks in the direction of the sound and sees a trailer, partially hidden behind the tree trunks and bushes, about 30 feet away. His right ear pops loudly several times and he rubs at it, feeling fluid come out. He knows it's blood. The cat slowly begins to stand up and immediately gets a terrible shock as he realizes the weakness he'd felt in his arms is also in his legs. He struggles and stumbles his way to the tree, trying not to panic again before finally leaning up against it. Let me go! I can't breathe! Arturo realizes he's not the only one in this nightmare. Did the monster come back for Cam? I'm sorry! Arturo starts moving toward the trailer before it dawns on his shattered, bewildered mind that he's looking at the bear's trailer. The one that shot him, and he must have Cameron in there. Devin, help me! Devin! Devin! Arturo flinches back at the sound. His fur bristles out along his spine, eyes wide as Cameron's screaming echoes through the forest. Cat looks around him desperately, hoping that Devin does come to help. Even though that evil bear is bigger, Devin's a pretty big bear too, and he would stand a much better chance than he himself would. Thuds followed by yelps and howls come next, and finally it's too much for Arturo. Dev, you're Marin. He can't go in there like this. He knows that, but he can get help. Maybe. Depending on how bad it is, these problems he's having could get a lot worse over the course of just a few hours. But he has no choice. While he knows he has a car, he also knows that he can't use it, even though he can't remember why. He remembers that there's a highway, the one that they should have gone to the second he got here. He needs to get them all help. So, with one more terrified look at that trailer, he starts to make his way out of the forest. At first, Arturo is filled with a sense of hopelessness as he finds out just how hard it is to walk, with his right side being almost limp. It feels like half of his muscles have just wasted away. But after some trial and error, he finds that if he widens his stance a bit and swings his arms in a way that looks a bit lopsided, he's able to keep his balance. His pace is reasonable as well, so swallowing down his panic again, he makes his way back onto the dirt road. Even through the disbelief of his situation, and even though he's terrified for Cameron and Devon, he feels something deep down that's even worse. He tries to ignore it, but it gnaws at the back of his brain. He's dying, and he can feel it. Devon struggles with his handcuffs, trying to get the chain into the position that he wants. He pulls his paws up until the chain is taut, then moves slowly in a circle around the bolt until the chain twists on itself. That was the easy part, and based on the tension he felt being put on the chain links, he'd been feeling pretty confident. But then he spent what feels like the last hour trying to actually put enough force and weight into the motion so that the chain would break. While the twisted chain is taking most of the pressure off his own wrist, it still hurts. Devon can see through his fur that he's already starting to bleed from his wrists, and fur is coming off in small tufts with each failed twist and jerk. Come on, damn it. Please. Another failed heave. Devon slumps. After another failed heave, Devon slumps with his paws pressed to the floor of the van, gasping and sweating. A wave of dizziness comes over him and he ends up pressing his face to the metal floor. Please, please help me. Devon half-heartedly prays, just in case there is something above all of this. Footsteps. Devon scrambles to twist back around and step over the anchoring bolts that his paws are behind him again, sitting up to face the back door of the van. It opens, and Devon finds himself staring at the bear that did this to him. Even though he doesn't want Cameron anywhere near this man, seeing that the coyote isn't here with Brian sends panic through the younger bear. What do you want? Where's Cameron? Please! Shut it! Devon watches with dread as he sees this huge bear holding that water bottle. Please, just tell me what you want. I'll give it to you. Just let me see him. His teeth snap together, and the next thing the bear knows is that his head is resting against the metal cage partition that separates the back of the van from the seats. Dazed, his chin is on his chest, his arms under his back, forcing him to arch his chest and stomach towards the van's roof. Then Brian is on him, pressing the bottle to his lips. Dazed from the punch, Devon can only mumble in protest. No, no! Devon sees the look in the other bear's eyes and he knows that eventually he's going to have to drink from the bottle again. Feeling completely defeated, Devon continues to plead with the man. Wait, just wait. Please, just tell me what you want. Is he okay? Boy, you're really starting to piss me off. You don't do what the fuck I tell you. Brian grabs Devon's chest fur in both paws and hauls him up so he's sitting in a more upright position. I'm gonna take it out on your little cocksocked yoke, you understand me? Now shut up! But Devon can't shut up. He's half convinced that Cameron is already dead. Please, just let me see him so I know he's okay.
Alright. I was gonna say you already earned him one good hit. Now it's two. Wanna add a third?
Devin just stares. Of course he knows that Brian doesn't need an excuse, that if he really wants to hurt Cameron, he can. Because there's nothing Devin can do. He can only do what the older bear tells him to do, so he opens his muzzle. Slowly, Brian pours the slightly bitter water into his mouth, and Devin drinks. Even though his body wants to keep drinking, Devin starts to pull back after only a few swallows, as if he's had enough, and doesn't even suspect the water is drugged. But Brian pushes the bottle hard enough that Devin's lips are painfully mashed between the plastic and his own teeth, and he's forced to keep drinking. Even when he lets a tiny bit dribble out from the corner of his mouth, Brian growls more threats at him. Eventually the water is gone and Devin hangs his head in defeat as Brian pulls back, backing out of the van.
I'll be back to check on you. Don't think I need to tell you what'll happen if you even think of trying to puke that up.
Devin squeezes his eyes shut, wishing this fucking bear would just tell him what is happening, what he's doing to Cameron, why he's keeping him alive. But the younger bear is too afraid to talk, too afraid of what Brian might do, so without another word, the van door is slammed shut. Cameron stays under the table, the Xanax having kicked in fully by this point, leaving the coyote in a bit of a quiet, stoic haze. His sobbing has trailed off, not much emotion left in him, just feeling numb. His trip is getting more and more intense, and he knows that the peak is nearing, maybe in another half hour. Still, he begins to notice things that he's sure aren't part of this trip. Presence, not too far away, one that he knows very well. Dev. With no idea what he's doing, he instinctively reaches out toward that warm energy, but then he's interrupted by another presence he doesn't recognize, one that's much closer. Cameron gets on his paws and knees, looking out from under the table. This vision is definitely different than anything he's experienced before. Unlike the dreamlike, reality-altering psilocybin, the vision he's entered has a clarity to it. Like he's not even tripping at all. The figure of someone appears before him, and Cameron knows everything immediately. Benjamin Kowalski, a rabbit, born in 1977, ran away from his Pueblo home when he was 16. For several years, he moved from city to city, sometimes in neighboring states, before settling in Peyton. He stocked shelves at a grocery store, and the extra money he saved up would fund his weed supply. Brian was his dealer. In September 1998, he agreed to let Brian take him to his trailer home in Echo. He was promised 2 ounces of weed in exchange for 1 night of love-making, as the bear had put it. Benjamin wasn't gay, and even if he was pretty sure Brian wouldn't be his type. 2 ounces was a lot, though, and way too good to pass up. After 4 days of torture, Brian accidentally strangled him for too long, and Benjamin didn't regain consciousness. Of course, Brian planned on killing him anyway, so he did. The bear was only disappointed that he didn't get a few more days with him. Timothy Esposito was a skunk born in 1985 in the Midwest. His hometown was a large industrial city, one that had been in decay for his entire life. So he transplanted to Mesa, and in May 2005, That was where he attended a BDSM-themed event in an unused warehouse. He liked breath play, and so did Brian, so they fooled around a bit. He didn't much like Brian, but the bear liked him a lot. Brian liked him so much, in fact, that he followed the skunk as he walked home after the event and kidnapped him on an empty street. Timothy was strong and almost escaped multiple times, once managing to leave the trailer before being caught just a few dozen feet from the dirt road. Brian continued their breath play, except now it wasn't play at all, and after 2 weeks, Brian again suffocated his victim for too long. This time, Brian thought he was fairly successful in keeping his victim alive that long. Daniel Gallegos was a ferret born in 1996. He was from the Sonoran capital, but was staying with family in Mill City to work a summer job. He was saving up money for his university tuition. In August 2014, days before he was meant to head back to Sonora, he met Brian outside a club before being kidnapped and driven to Echo. Brian was able to keep him for an entire month, and even though a few of Brian's customers had seen him tied to the torture rack, no one said a thing. Eventually, Brian seemed to decide he'd gotten all he could out of the ferret, and he bludgeoned Daniel to death with an old tire iron. Just because he wanted to try something different. Bear couldn't believe how long it took, how hard he had to hit the kid before he finally stopped moving.
Cameron!
Cameron is jolted back to reality as he's yanked up by his shirt, so he's not even touching the floor. Brian's paws hold the front of his shirt while shaking him violently.
What? What is it?
Cameron kicks around to try and get his feet on the solid ground again. Despite being almost overwhelmed by the numbing calm of Xanax, it's not enough to stop the primal fear Cameron has of this bear. Especially not after seeing the horrors he committed on those men. What he'd just seen was condensed, distilled into an easy-to-follow series of events, but all the while he'd absorbed all the tiny details too. He knows Brian promised these men many things, that he'd only keep them for 1, 2, 3 more days before letting them go. That if they'd just be a little more quiet, he'd let them go. But Cameron knows none of those promises were kept. Visions had been so real that to Cameron, it felt like he'd been there for everything they went through. Luckily, he hadn't felt anything, but it was as if he was in the room with them. This room. Brian seems to gain some control over himself and lets go of the coyote. Cameron isn't able to stand with his weak, shaking legs, and sits down heavily on the ground, looking up at the looming bear.
Kept calling your name and you wouldn't answer. I told you to let me know if the visions were starting. I couldn't.
Brian waits, looking more impatient than the more Cameron stammers, which only makes him stammer more.
I swear to fucking God, why do you, all of you become whimpering little dipshits the second I lose my cool for like a second?
He reaches down and Cameron cringes as he's yanked up to his feet again. It's clear that Brian wants him to keep standing this time, so he does, steadying himself against the table behind him.
Quit that crying.
He does his best to stop, but the sobs keep coming. Brian, the visions, the people that he just felt, it's not an easy thing to just shrug off.
I said to quit, not be quieter.
Cameron's mouth dries up even more, his tongue now sandpaper against... Oops. Cameron's mouth dries up even more, his tongue now sandpaper against the roof of his mouth as fear helps shock him into a statue-like state. Cameron knows he owes a lot to the sedative right now. Without it, he wouldn't be able to stop and Brian might kill him.
That's better. But faster next time, got it?
Okay. Cameron opens his mouth to answer but finds himself yanked forward suddenly, only to come to a horrible jarring stop as the bear slams his knee into the coyote's torso. Cameron watches the luminous arches writhe about, convulsing almost like they're mirroring the coyote's inner turmoil. The knee is so big compared to himself that it seems to cover most of his stomach.
You can thank your boyfriend for that one. He still earned you one more.
Brian finally pulls back and Cameron crumples to the ground, unable to process what Brian is saying. Not that he'd be able to understand it anyway. The coyote lets out a guttural groan over and over again.
What's that you're saying?
Brian taunts him from above, and Cameron responds with a whooping gasp, pressing his face into the floor in agony.
I asked you a fucking question.
Cameron is lifted into the air again, feeling his feet kick around for purchase on the ground as he once again dangles from his shirt, the fabric stretching to the point that Cameron can hear the threads popping in his collar. Cameron cracks open an eye and sees Brian drawing back a huge paw, and Cameron manages to choke out a few words with the tiny amount of air he's gathered into his collapsed lungs.
No, nothing.
Cameron wheezes loudly between the words, knowing that this is exactly what Brian likes, but how can he stop himself? He's not even sure if stopping himself would help. Maybe that will only trigger Brian into hurting him more. But to Cameron's relief, the bear pauses and slowly drops his fist. Cameron sees the wild look in Brian's eye gradually leave as he stares at the gasping coyote in his grasp.
Good. Guess I'll save the other for later then.
The bear lets go and Cameron slumps back to his knees, curling up in the fetal position.
Now, what was it you saw?
He didn't feel any pain. But now he does.
Speak up, Arturo. The whole class needs to hear you.
He's in front of 20 curious, attentive eyes while his paws shake, almost making his papers rattle. He's had less than a year to learn a new language, and now they expect him to give an entire book report. Give anything to be in his room, gaming on his brand new PlayStation 2, but first, he has to figure out how to survive these next 5 minutes. He's playing on his PlayStation in his dorm room when Maria walks in. Hey, beautiful. You able to get some sleep? He doesn't look up from his game.
Oh, you show know my overflow toe.
That makes him look up.
Huh?
She looks confused, frustrated.
Born and sworn and to mourn and forlorn?
He puts down the controller and stands up. Baby, what? Arturo installs a lock on the medicine cabinet. He helps her eat healthy. He helps make sure she goes to bed at the right time. Whenever she feels a mood swing approaching high or low, they prepare together. Maria once cried and told him that she wasn't worth it, and that he should find someone that isn't an unpredictable mess. He told her she was definitely worth it, that they just needed to be prepared. Arturo opens his eyes and then cringes at the ache in his head. Not an ache, but an explosion ripping through his skull, his brains, and down his spine. It hurts so much that he lets out a sound that's a half moan, half scream. This time it seems to take even longer for him to understand where and when he is. He had been moving as fast as he could without actually running or jogging, since he isn't even capable of doing that. He guessed he had probably made it 2 miles away from Echo, so 7 more to go. He had just been thinking about how he was walking almost exactly like his grandfather did after a stroke. And Arturo had thought, well, actually, now we'll actually have something to bond over before it happened. A dizzy spell, unlike all the others, made him stumble, like he was looking over the edge of a cliff. Then anxiety, like he'd never known before, overcame him, making his heart beat so fast Arturo was convinced it was going to explode. He got on his knees, started praying for help, and then... now he's here, on the ground, his nose and forehead stinging from where it slammed into the asphalt. The rest of his body just aches. He'd had a seizure, and even though he's never had one before, he knows that's what happened. At least he was on his knees, so his face didn't have far to fall. Still, he's left feeling so exhausted, so defeated that he just wants to lay there. He'd been in a half-dream state, completely confused as he stared around him, memories flicking through his mind like a viewmaster. An hour had passed, maybe 2, before he finally understood what his situation was again. He almost wants to go back to that confused state, pretend it's a dream. But now he's crying, because how is he going to take care of Maria if he can barely walk, barely talk? She's good at taking care of herself, but he needs to be there just in case. He needs to live, and he needs to get better. And while he's glad to be out of Echo, he knows Cameron is still there, and if Devin is gone too, he knows the bear would only want him to save Cameron. Get up, Arturo. All your friends need you. Eventually, he slowly sits up, his paws shaking so badly he's worried he's having another seizure. But eventually, he steadies himself. He needs to keep moving. So, with a deep, shuddering breath, Arturo starts to carefully get up, and that's when he sees it. It stares, and Arturo just stares back silently. In that moment, he's sure that he actually did die, that what he assumed was a seizure was really just the end. And now this thing, this embodiment of death, is here to take him. Instead of moving toward him, though, or really acknowledging him in any way, it doesn't move at all. Arturo notices something out of the corner of his eyes, and though it's distant, he sees lights. Headlights. Multiple headlights moving in both directions on the landscape. The highway. Arturo looks back, but it's gone. With nothing else to do, he starts to get up. He's sure that he didn't see those lights before he collapsed, but a lot of memory is missing. Several patches between when he was shot and now are unaccounted for. And what he saw was probably just a product of his failing brain. So, wordlessly, he walks in his wide stance with his arms swinging awkwardly, knowing that nothing will be the same again. And I think that's where I'm going to end it for tonight. I think that next part is going to be pretty long, so 3 parts is enough for one night. Alright. Thanks for watching.